Hi, I'm Ray from the Radio Workshop, back again, not with tales of pirate radio or anything, but what to do with pirate radio. Back in the 60s, people often ask me what it was like back in those days when you had Radio Caroline, Radio London, Swinging Radio England, Laser. You had all these pirate stations. People just sort of want to know a little bit about it. Radio was totally different then. Now you've got your FM stations, and my son said to me, I think I mentioned this before, he said, whatever FM station I'm listening to as I drive along, I can change around. He said, you wouldn't know one from another, they all sound the same. Probably because most of them are owned by the same company, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I think there's only a couple of companies out there, aren't there, that sort of own the lot. So they're not going to be, they're not going to be very different, are they? Going back to the 60s, what we had, I was a teenager, okay, so I liked Radio Luxembourg, obviously. That's all we had. Before the Pirates, there was Radio Luxembourg. There was, what was there? There was the BBC Light programme. That was okay. It was light entertainment, light music, nothing, no sort of rock or pop or anything. It was just light entertainment. The third programme, which was classical music, which was excellent if that's what you want, BBC Home Service, which was news and drama and plays and all that stuff. What else was there? There wasn't local, no local stuff at all back in those days. So, no commercial radio. So teenagers like me had nothing to listen to. We were kind of left out. And of course, when the Pirates came along, I remember first tuning into Radio London. I thought, wow, this is it. This is unbelievable, And Caroline and the rest of them. This was something for us as teenagers, something that we've never had before. I remember driving along at one time, listening to Radio Luxembourg. Luxembourg was in the evening. Okay, you couldn't get it very well in the day because it's Luxembourg is a long way away. And with the propagation, it was good at night, but not in the daytime. I remember driving along. I had this girlfriend of mine next to me in the car, and they're advertising Durex on Radio Luxembourg. And I thought, wow, this is different. You don't get that sort of thing on the BBC. Well, of course, they don't have advert. I've got some notes here. But, Emperor Roscoe and all that was terrific on Luxembourg. But then, of course, the ships came along in the North Sea. And that really did change stuff because you could listen to them in the daytime. The ground wave, they had the vertical areas, the ground wave nicely covered, certainly where I am, down the south coast here. And, of course, the east coast, being on the North Sea. So it was a good signal. Transistor radio, perfectly good signal, which was great. People would take their radios down the beach. Wherever you went, there was someone with a transistor radio. I remember, when I lived at home, my mother had a transistor radio on the kitchen windowsill. All mothers did. That's what they did in the kitchen. They had a transistor radio on the windowsill. And I was quite surprised. I got in one day and she's listening to Radio Caroline. And I said to her, what happened to the BBC Light programme? Oh, I prefer this. And that was my mother. I don't know how old she was then, but and I thought, oh, this is good. It's cool. I'm not allowed to say cool now. I'm too old. But in fact, we invented the word. Well, no, we started using the word cool, and now I'm told by my grandkids I'm too old to say cool. Oh no, coolio it was. I started saying coolio. You can't say that, Grandad. Got my notes here. Look. And Caroline, Radio London. I always preferred London. The DJs. Unlike these days, it's all sort of plastic, isn't it? It's all done by the book. Well, it is literally. The DJs back then, they weren't just DJs, they were entertainers. Kenny Everett on Radio London was fantastic. It wasn't just putting on records, which is what they seem to do now. Well, it's not records now, is it? It's whatever it is, computer. But they weren't just putting on records as they do now. They're just playing music as they do now. I know there's a bit of chat. There's phone calls and, oh, hello, Mrs. Smith. You lost some weight? Yeah, I've lost 3 stone. I mean, no one's really interested in that. Well, perhaps some people are, but I'm not. I certainly wasn't as a teenager. I wanted to listen to the music and have a bit of entertainment. I remember it was 1st of April on Radio London, and the weather forecast chap said something along the lines of going to be a lot of rain over London today, over the city, except for one or two areas where there'll be a heat wave. And of course you're left thinking, yeah, what's he on about? And then he said something about the southeast of the country will be, it's going to be really beautiful weather all over, absolutely, you know, high temperatures and all this, apart from one or two spots where there will be heavy snow. You know, you think, hang on a minute, what's going on? It was fun. I think that's the difference. It was fun radio back in those days. You know, you knew, you felt that you were part of the radio station and not just some removed person listening to it. You know, you felt that you got to know the DJs. You know, you knew them almost personally. That's the difference between then and now. I think if anyone ever said what is the difference, that is it. I mean, obviously, you know, they played good music then. They're playing good music now. You don't get me wrong. I like a lot of today's stuff. I like Ellie Goulding and you know, stuff like that. Paloma Faith. You know, I like all this stuff, but it's the DJs or whatever they are now. They're just, I don't know, they just sit there reading a script, you know. Whereas back then it was fun radio. Of course, the BBC weren't happy and they kind of colluded with the government to get rid of the pirates, which was a bit naughty. I mean, surely, if you've got competition, the way to deal with your competition is to be better than them, isn't it? Not to go and close them down so you can carry on being no good at all, you know. I mean, you know, I restore radios. If I've got competition, well, I don't go and try and close them down. You know, I try to do a better job than they do at a better price. That way I win, you know. The BBC with their resources, you know, they could have opened a radio station that would have just wiped the pirates off the map if they'd done it properly. You know, they were land-based, the BBC. You know, it was legal, so they didn't have to hide from people. You know, they had the aerials, they had the transmitters, they had everything. The studios, they could really have just wiped the pirates off the map, but there we are. The nautical map, that is. It's a shame. I mean, Radio 1, I remember the day Radio 1 started. There was Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 3 and Radio 4. And, you know, Tony Blackburn, what was that? I forget the first record. Oh, yeah, I woke up one morning, half asleep, you know, all my blankets in a heap. That was great. Flowers in the Rain, was it, or something? By The Move, I think. I'm probably wrong. Yeah, that was great. We thought, oh, this sounds all right. And, of course, it was a really good signal, because it was land-based, you know, they weren't having to bob around on the waves out at sea. But it's soon, within an hour, sort of this was in the radio and TV workshop where I was at the time. We all listened to the day one of Radio 1. Within an hour, we're sort of looking at each other like, this is no good. People are shaking their heads. Oh, no. People are tuning back into Caroline and London. You know, they would have done anyway, but you know, because they were loyal to the pirates. But and the name, I remember people saying Radio 1. Didn't have an imagination. Couldn't they come up with a decent name for the radio station? You know, Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 3 and 4. We'd now got Radio 5, haven't we, and stuff. Oh, we had the BBC World Service back in those days, of course, on medium wave. But Radio 1, yeah, you think they could come out with something, you know, to, I don't know, a bit better for the teenagers, like I was. Yeah, Radio 1, but there we are. And of course, on Radio 1, the DJ would say, right, we've now got the latest one for the Beatles, whatever, you know, I want to hold your hand by the Beatles, played by the NDO, the Northern Dance Orchestra. Well, teenagers wanted to listen to the Beatles. I mean, I was into the Stones, but there we are. But they wanted to listen to the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Who, not the Northern Dance Orchestra, doing a kind of copy of, you know, today's pop music. I mean, with all due respect to the Northern Dance Orchestra, they were probably very good at what they did. But, you know, imagine today, you know, the DJ said, right, here's one by Green Day, played by the Northern Dance Orchestra. I mean, people would turn the radio off, which is exactly what people did. What it was needle time, what they called needle time. Basically, you know, the BBC had to pay copyright to the artists, you know, to the groups, the bands, they had to pay a copyright. So they had what they called needle time, which was the amount of time they were playing records. The amount of time the needle, or more correctly the stylus, was on the record. So they could only play so many hours of records per day, because they couldn't afford the copyright or whatever. That's what I heard anyway. That's true. There was needle time, whereas the pirates, they could sit there playing records 24 hours a day, which they did, all sorts of records. And the argument, well, the BBC all said, oh, well, they're not paying copyright, that's not fair on the artists. Well, it was fair on the artists, because I remember some of them being interviewed, members of bands and rock and roll groups and that, they were saying, they're playing our records, which is great. It's getting our records out to millions of listeners, and the people are buying our records. They get the copyright from the sales of the records. Just because the ship wasn't paying the copyright, that didn't matter. That wasn't a problem. The ship was pushing out their records to millions of listeners. Then everyone's running downtown and buying them. So, it worked really well. I did feel sorry for the BBC. They couldn't afford this copyright business. They were stuck with their needle time. Obviously, some of the attraction about listening to the pirate stations is that they were in a ship out in the North Sea. They were called pirates, and it was not legal and stuff or whatever, and that made it exciting. When you're a teenager, that's exciting. I remember in Rough Seas, the one DJ I was listening, and he said, "I've just put a 2-bob bit on top of the arm." The record player, the arm that goes. I'm saying all this because a lot of youngsters watch these videos as well. You might think, what's a record player? What's an arm? What's a 2-bob bit? It's a coin, a 2-shilling piece was a coin, or even a half-crown piece, which was bigger and heavier. Stick that on the arm so that the stylus wouldn't jump across the grooves of the record as the ship's doing this. It slides back and forth over the record. So that made it all more, more entertaining, more fun, more real, I suppose. It wasn't plastic, it was real. And one DJ, he said, we got Rough Seas. For the technically minded of you listening, the modulation transformers just slid across the floor. So modulation transformer, part of the transmitter, probably a big thing, big heavy sort of iron transformer, and it actually slid across the floor, the deck or whatever it was. And that made it, especially for those of us that were, like radio and TV engineers, we knew what the mod tranny was, and it was, we just pictured it with its cables and stuff and thousands of volts on it. Brilliant. It was, as I said, it was fun. Of course, we did have local, land-based pirates. I know many, not me, of course, I know many people that, transmitted on medium wave, their own pirate stations. There were one or two that they were too serious. It was, they wanted to be professional, and they wanted to be so professional. These were pirate stations I used to listen to down here on the south coast. One or two wanted to be so professional that they were more like the BBC. It was more like Radio 1. It didn't work. Well, not for me at least. I liked the ones where things would go wrong. They'd suddenly go off the air, then come back on the air. And you think, hello, what's going on there? Trouble with the transmitter, aerials come down. GPO have turned up, which GPO used to bust the pirates in those days. Especially if you heard suddenly halfway through a record, the transmissions are cut. Hello, the GPO have arrived. But sometimes they come back on again. It was just a fault, something had blown up, or I don't know. It was good fun. As I say, one or two of the land-based pirates, though, they were too serious, trying to be too professional, and they played the right music, but it just didn't work. And I think with the BBC, when something used to go wrong, it was good. It made them human. When it's all, when everything's working properly and each record is faded in and out, and the DJ, there's no gaps, it's all done properly. It's not human. It's all plastic. I keep using that word, plastic. It's the best word I can think of. Or let's go to cardboard. The DJs were like cardboard cutouts. I remember in one chap's bedroom, this big transmitter fired up. We're on the air, and the aerial wire went up. So you past the curtains and out of the window, and the curtains caught fire. Yeah, he lived with his parents, and this was he set fire to his mother's curtains in the bedroom. He was trying to put the curtains out. There's flames going up to the ceiling, but we stayed on the air. Actually, well, they did. I didn't. Obviously, wouldn't get involved in anything like that. Of course, I got involved. What am I saying? If you want a taste of what it was like, do you know, there's been a load of internet radio stations over the years, calling themselves various things, from the old days. If you want a taste of what Radio London, at least, was really like, go on the internet, Wonderful Radio London 266. You've got to have the 266 on the end. Just type that in, Wonderful Radio London 266. They don't seem to have DJs, but they've got the music, obviously. They've got news snippets from those days, the 60s. I've only listened to it for the last couple of days. There's Kenny Everett I've heard on there doing funny bits and pieces. All sorts on there. So it's not just playing 60s music. They've got all the jingles. I mean, I've got jingles and stuff on the computer. I daren't play them here. It would have been great on the video, to pop a jingle in here and there. Wonderful Radio London, all that stuff. But what was it, Caroline? Back in Time on the Sound of the Nation. It's a Caroline flashback. I've got all those jingles, but most people have. They're all over the internet. But of course, if I put them on here, we're back with that copyright issue and probably get told off by YouTube or whatever. But yeah, have a listen. Wonderful Radio London 266. Just going back to Radio Luxembourg for a minute. I don't know how true this is, but apparently the record companies, they send out records to radio stations, okay? The latest Beatles or Stones one, they'd send them out to the radio stations, we wouldn't charge them. And they used to send them out to Luxembourg. And the BBC or the government, or somehow they got that stopped. I don't suppose Luxembourg cared, they get their own copies, they go and buy their own. But I think that was another sort of pathetic, underhand thing to try and get at Radio Luxembourg. As I said earlier, surely if you've got competition, the way to beat the competition is to be better than them. But I don't know, the government, the BBC, they didn't think that was, they probably didn't know how to. They didn't. The thing is, in those days with the BBC, it was a lot of old boys, wasn't it? Sitting in an office with their pipes, having all these pirates. Oh no, we'll have Radio 1. Radio 1, it just didn't work. But it was all old school stuff. All these old boys with their pipes and their ties sitting in an office. They should have, I don't know, they should have got some younger blood in and said, right, we want to get to the teenagers that are listening to the pirates. Luxembourg, it's a shame Luxembourg went. I did hear why it went. It's not transmitting anymore, is it? I did hear why it stopped. I can't remember. I'll have to find out. I keep mentioning teenagers, but of course it wasn't only teenagers that listened. I remember actually a friend of mine, his brother was about 10, he had a younger brother. Whenever I went around his house, his brother, he had a little transistor radio of his own, he'd listen to Caroline. But people in their 20s, 30s, 40s would listen to the ships. It wasn't just teenagers. So surely that shows that the radio stations, it must have been pretty good to have that wide an audience, from like 10 years old up to 40s or even more, I don't know. That's interesting. They obviously did it about right. So I remember some people say, it's all Americanized, they're just copying American radio stations. Well, I don't know whether that was true or not. If it was true, so what? It worked, so what? People have said to me, how did you put up with the dreadful audio quality on medium wave in those days? The interference, the crackling, the whistles and stuff, a nearby lightning storm, and you'd hear all over medium wave on your radio, Actually, the audio quality on medium wave back in those days was probably better than it is on medium wave these days. They had Optimod. That's probably, it's all computer now, all done on computer, but the audio quality was excellent. Yes, there was interference, the cracklings and bangs and stuff going on, buzzes and things, but that was part of it. If that was somehow part of the whole thing, that was radio. You're talking to teenagers, and older people these days, they don't They've got their phones, haven't they? Their iPads, their tablets and stuff, and their Bluetooth headphones and whatever they got. And they got all this stuff, so they don't actually, although they listen to the radio, it's not radio as it was, you know, when I was. It's not one of these, is it? It's not a good old Bush radio. HMV, Marconi. Oh, remember that Van Morrison song? What's it? Tuning into Luxembourg, Hilversum and all that. Forget what it's called now. Oh, Before the Days of Rock and Roll. Have I listened to that? Yeah. Before, I think it was Before the Days of Rock and Roll it was called. Van Morrison. Empty Cup. So, yes, have a listen to Wonderful Radio London 266. And I'd have a quick think, see whether there's I say anything I've missed out. I could ramble on for hours about the 60s. The nightclubs. Oh, terrific, the nightclubs. Yeah, I remember the live bands. You've got lead guitarist and singer, bass guitarist and drums. Okay, you've got 3 people. You've got a couple of amps, a bass amp, the lead guitar amp, and the drummer. Well, he didn't have an amp, he just had perhaps a microphone. There wasn't all this stuff. You see these live bands in pubs and that these days. On the floor, there's a whole host of switches and synthesized stuff, and they didn't have any of that nonsense. You didn't see Jimi Hendrix with that. I saw him at the Albert Hall. Brilliant. Yeah, he had his fuzz box and his wah-wah pedal, but all the electronics they have in front of them on the stage now, wires and switches and, oh dear. It's again, live bands now in pubs and clubs sound totally different to back in the 60s. You know, it was, I don't know, somehow again it was real. You know, Marshall amps, none of the electronics making all these weird sounds. Decent Marshall amps and speakers. Yeah, happy days. As I say, I could waffle on for hours. I could hear you. Please don't waffle on for hours. Shut up now. You can always turn off if you're bored. I don't know. Look at this. This is lovely. I've almost finished this one, restoring it. The thing is, another thing with bands these days, they arrive, don't they, at the pub or wherever. Loads of gear. You know, after an hour, they're still setting up, plugging in things, twang, 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 all this. Still setting up. Hour and a half goes by, no, they're still setting up. In the old days, a band would come into the pub, dump their amps, plug stuff in, guitar, yeah, tune up, twang, 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 by ear, yeah, that'll do, twang, twang, that'll do, drum up, right, and they'd start playing. You know, they'd start playing within like 10 minutes of walking into the pub. You know, just plug the stuff in and play, or perhaps 15 minutes. Whereas now you've got to wait for an hour and a half. And when they'd finished, you know, back then, they just unplugged stuff, pack it all up, which took a few minutes, picked up their amps and guitars and off they went. They just cleared off. Whereas now they're still there at 3 in the morning. Well, not quite, but you know, you think they'd be still there at 3 in the morning loading up their cars and stuff. I don't know, definitely did sound good though back in the old days. Proper Marshall amps and not these modern speakers on posts, on sticks up in the air, you know, that's no good. You want the speakers down here and get the bass, especially the bass. Happy days, feel the bass through your body. Not on medium wave, of course, but there we are. Anyway, I hope I haven't bored you too much. Just a bit of a taster of what, you know, what it was like back in the 60s. Watney's Red Barrel, Double Diamond, pint of DD, please. Dear me. That was well, I won't say it, but yeah, no, it was all right. It was okay. Of course, if you went to Spain, everywhere in Spain, you know, fish and chips, beans on toast. And when I went to Spain, I didn't want that. I'd get that here. I wanted to try out their food. Not fish and chips and beans on toast and Watney's Red Barrel. Happy days. Bring back the pirate stations. Thanks for watching. See you all again soon. Bye-bye.